Hi everyone, my name is Erin Ryan from Color Fun Quilts, and today I'm going to show you how to make these scrappy log cabin style blocks. So what I start out with are collecting all of my scrap strips from previous projects. So I go through and I sort them by length, and I try and give myself a range of lengths, so the smallest length being about 3 inches or so, and then the longest ones being up to 18 inches. If I have a lot of strips that are really long, I'll cut them down so that I have a nice mix of all ranges, so that as I go through and build my block, I have color options to choose from. And that just helps to sort of mix it up and keep things a little bit more scrappy looking. I have all sorts of widths. So I will keep a strip that's as small as 1 inch wide and as wide as 3 inches or so. And I find this to be really helpful to get that sort of scrappy effect, but you don't want to have anything that's so wide that it really starts to offset and create an imbalance in your quilt block. So, all that being said, we're going to start by choosing our center pieces. I start with 2-inch squares and I pair 2 of them together. And then what I'll do is build around and sort of create this spiraling effect as I add strips for the whole block. So for the ones that I used in my Scrappy quilt, I made blocks that were big enough to be trimmed down to 12.5 inches. I have a 12.5 inch square ruler, so that worked really well for me. But you could keep this going and make these blocks as big as you want, so long as you have the length strips needed to make it happen. So that's what I'm gonna do today, is make one that's big enough to be cut down to 12.5 inches. So I'll probably aim for my block to be 13.5. I am gonna try and keep my block square. So that's one thing that if I need to sort of break the rule of the directionality that I'm adding my strips, if I would normally add on, the next side, I might skip and do the opposite side, because it's going to keep my blocks a little bit more square instead of making it more rectangular. So that might mean that my center blocks here, my center squares, are not really truly center, and that's okay. It's just how I prefer to work, and the whole point of this is to have fun and not worry about it looking a little bit wonky or imbalanced or whatever the case may be. I think my only rule is that I try not to use the same 2 colors in each block. So if I can, I'll mix it up enough so that I don't repeat fabrics. Obviously I'm using similar colors in that I have oranges and pinks, and those repeat in no particular order or balance, but I try not to use 2 of the exact same fabrics in one block. Okay, so the first thing that I'm gonna do is I have a pile of 2-inch squares here, and I'm just gonna pick 2 and sew them together, and that's gonna be the start of my block. I'm gonna do those 2, okay? I'm also not paying attention to seam allowances, as long as my seam allowance is roughly a 1/4 inch. It could be a little smaller, it could be a little larger. And not all of my strips are cut straight. So most of them have a straight-ish edge. And you could of course go in and cut a straight edge if you prefer, but I'm just kind of rolling with it. I'm also not going to press in between, because I think that adds a lot of time that's not necessary. So I have these 2 that I just sewed together. I'm going to open them up. I'm just going to sort of finger press by folding the seam back. And now I'm going to add a piece to the top here to start to square off this center piece. So I'm going to work with my smallest pile here, which are strips about 3 inches. And I'm just going to dig until I find one that I like. It doesn't necessarily need to be the exact right size. This one actually happens to fit well. But if it's a little bit bigger, that's okay. So I'm just going to fold that piece up and back, and there's my first strip. So the next thing I'm going to do is add one to the side. At this point, it doesn't really matter which side. I like to, assuming the one I just added is the top, I like to then work on the right side, but you could of course make that one the bottom and work on the left side. Okay, so let's find another piece. Might go orange. So as I mentioned, my strips are all different sizes, widths. So this orange one, for example, is definitely the thickest So if I'm feeling like I think it's too thick, I can trim it down and make it a little bit skinnier. I'm gonna just roll with it because I think that's part of the fun of this quilt. You'll also notice that it overhangs. So I'm gonna just trim that and keep going. So the next one I'll add is right here. And I might need to upgrade to my next pile of strips if I don't have anything that's the right length. And that one's a little too short. So I'm just gonna upgrade to my next pile here, and that's why we have these pre-existing piles. Makes this part of the process easier. Sometimes it's hard to choose, hard to decide. Okay, we'll do this one. Okay, so I'm going to trim the excess on that. Notice how I'm not really caring if it squares up nicely or anything like that. I'm just trimming and rolling. Okay, so now this is as far as I've gotten. I'm going to go ahead and add on this side. So see how my block is a bit more of a rectangle now? As I keep building, it will all balance itself out. So I'm going to do one along this edge now. So you can see it's coming along well. Ta-da! Just keep on building. Okay, so I have a ruler here on my sewing machine that I'm just gonna check to see how I'm doing. So I have about 12 1/4, so I'm gonna do at least one more strip on this side and 11 3/4. So I gotta do a couple more strips and then I'll be good. Okay, so we should be there now. 13 by 14, even better. So I'm going to get my iron on, press this, and then trim it up. So the thing that I love about this is it's okay if your block looks a little stretched or wonky or something, because it's scrappy and it's fun and it's playful and nobody's checking. You're gonna square it up, they'll go together great. I think that's the thing I always have problems with strips is strip projects always require you to be really precise and to make sure that your strips are not stretching or bowing or something. And this doesn't really matter. As long as your block press is flat enough, you're fine. So I'm going to take my ruler here, lay my block out. I'm just going to kind of center up my ruler, but also I'm not really worrying about it if it doesn't work great. Just going to stick my hand in the middle and I'm going to trim around all four sides. So our block is finished. Easy peasy, right? So you'll just want to continue making these blocks. For the quilt in the tutorial, I used 25 of these blocks and made a 5x5 layout, and that made me a 60-inch quilt square. So I think these go together really fast. They're really easy to chain piece as well. I didn't chain piece these ones, but you absolutely could. And you can also go bigger. So I think I'm gonna actually keep adding to these and turn them into some pillows for my couch. Thanks for stopping by. I hope this inspires you to be scrappy and do something fun with all of those extra strips that are sitting in your stash.